Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Chat with Brandy, where we talk personal and business finance, taxes, and how to make money doing what you love. This is episode number 27. I am your host, bookkeeper, and tax preparer, Brandy Muron. And today is a special episode. I have a guest with me today. This is my friend, Winnie Lau with Empowered Life Financial Inc. She specializes in helping families and businesses with financial strategies to get more cash flow into their lives. So Winnie, say hi and tell us about yourself.
Hello, everyone, and so glad that we're finally able to get online and get together and do this. Been a while, a long time in waiting. So yeah, I completely am totally in love with what it is that I do. I get complete fulfillment out of being able to help families and their kids and their businesses just create a lot more control and cash flow inside their home economy.
Awesome. And yeah, one of the things that I really connected with Winnie on when we met was she has a real passion for teaching parents how to talk to kids about money and the different strategies that there are around that. And I personally have a passion for this. Obviously, I am a mom of 2 young kids, and just anyone that will listen to me knows that I am very interested in financial literacy, especially for youth. I don't think that there's enough emphasis on it in public school curriculum, especially when it comes to kind of teenage years, budgeting, that kind of thing. So I thought that it would be a really interesting topic to cover today. So today I'm just going to kind of rattle off some questions for you, Winnie, and hopefully you can share some of your knowledge with us. So first and foremost, why do you think it's important to talk to your kids about money?
Well, I think we're the best positioned, people to actually discuss money with our kids. We have all the coaching moments in our hands on a day-to-day level, right from when they wake up in the morning till they go to bed at night. Every time we take them out with us to do chores, errands, grocery shopping, you name it, there's all these opportunities throughout the day where money comes up. And one of the things that you shared right in the, just a few minutes ago was just really talking about how there's not enough information in the education system right now.
Yeah.
And a part of me definitely agrees, and on the other hand, I'm not sure that it needs to be left to the education system for the education system to really teach our kids about money. I mean, let's just face it, although it's a very inanimate object, it is one of the most emotionally charged subjects on the planet. And it's like, no, it's like anything else, and etiquette is like, don't bring, politics or religion to the dinner table. Money is no different. And I think that attempting to bring money into the mainstream education system is going to be a very difficult process because it's so personal to each and every one of us, right? Like our values and our beliefs around money are so different. I've come across parents who don't believe that money should be talked about until they're older because it's like, I don't want to force my kids to grow up so fast by talking to them about money. And yet, on the other hand, sometimes I compare the subject to, well, we all put our kids into swimming lessons at a really young age. Well, what causes us to do that? We think it's not only just a life-saving skill, but we want them to learn how to swim so that they don't drown while they're out having fun, because there's so many different activities that are in the water all the time, right? So as it relates to money, it's no different. We ought to start teaching our kids at a very young age and, by progression, so that when our kids get out into the world, they're not drowning in financial debt.
I love that analogy. And I do agree with you on, even if, there was a perfect curriculum or whatever in school for it, there would still need to be teaching at home in terms of just real life application and that kind of thing. Yeah, love the grocery store thing. Like even, as simple as teaching kids unit cost at a grocery store, where it's like, yeah, you might be paying less for a 6-pack, but buying the 100-pack is going to go a lot further. Like those are just the little basics, right? That It's way better for them, I feel like, to know now, even if they're 12 and they're not buying their own groceries, than it is for them to figure out, like you say, when they're thrown into that pool when they're 18 years old, right?
Yeah, I mean, I learned, I guess, please take what I say with a grain of salt. Like, what I share is completely value-based. This is just, it's based on my own values, mainly because I moved out when I was 15.
Okay.
So I really, even in my high school years, was it a priority for me to, really get like the best grades possible? Not really, because I was also, working 30 hours a week while I was also attempting to finish high school too. So my priorities were a little bit different, and I was exposed to a lot of things much earlier than most people, right?
Absolutely.
You asked a really key question, why is it important to talk to our kids about money? And you started going into like the grocery store example and, getting into the units. Well, I actually, at one point, I was teaching 3 different levels for about a 4-year period. And it was a cash, it's been at least 5 or 6 years since I've done it, so now the naming states, but it's a cash flow club for kids at one of the schools that my daughter went to. And I taught kids from like ages 5 all the way to just before kids go into high school.
Okay, yeah.
But I took the youngest class from like 5 to 7 into the dollar store. And the exercise was simply just to give them $5 and have them go through the exercise of attempting to spend within their means, and it was by cash, right? And like, there's so many different lessons all about that, because it's learning how to account for tax, it's learning how to make sure they get the right change back in their hands. It's all about even learning how to count the money.
Yeah.
And make sure because it's really our responsibility to make sure we have the right change in our hands even before we leave the till. Right?
Totally. I agree.
And and so it's 100% important to really start teaching your kids about money earlier rather than later, because the conversation is that do you want to be seen as the source of money for your kids, or do you want your kids to be accountable for their money and know that they're the ones that are going to be responsible? Because trying to change the conversation, once you've already allowed yourself to be seen as the person that gives them all the money, and try changing the conversation when they're teenagers.
Mm-hmm.
When they know how to talk back.
Yeah, no, totally.
Not so fun.
So speaking of that kind of ages, and I know you kind of touched on it earlier, obviously it's different for every family. It's going to be different culturally and that kind of thing. But in general, what age do you start talking about money, and what kind of topics are appropriate for an age group? So if you say, under 6, what kind of things are appropriate for that age group versus, 7 to 12 versus teenagers?
Well, I mean, I can only speak in generalizations, because I've met some kids that are like just ahead of their time, and of course, if they've got older siblings, they're exposed to way more. So I'll leave the appropriateness really up to the parents, right? Because it's so subjective to say what is appropriate. But some really defining lines between what you can discuss with an older child versus a younger child. So a child going through puberty, right? You can actually start talking to them about, okay, well, the difference between a basic bra versus like a fancy bra, right? That sort of a thing. Just all the things that are appropriate for that age group. You can start talking to them about that, like makeup. I guess I'm really speaking more towards a girl. Like, I don't know what it would be for a guy, per se, because I don't have a boy. But do you have any suggestions around? I'm actually kind of thinking now.
I think, like, for me, when my kids were under 6, it was more about, like you say, like identifying the coins, right? Like knowing how to count the money. And then like, yeah, like keeping things within a budget is always going to be, obviously you start simple and you get more complex, but like you say, keeping it appropriate to their interests and keeping it, like you say, whether it's a teenage girl and she likes makeup or whether it's a 5-year-old boy and he likes candy, like it's about understanding the amount of money that you have and how to budget that properly, and then not just skirting over the whole credit issue too, right? Like I feel like and this is kind of part of my next question, but allowances and like you say, the bank of mom and the bank of dad giving you like cash advances on the allowances, right? Like it's the beginning of like a revolving credit. It's the beginning of teachings of credit cards and the way that debt works. And I think that that's really important for kids of any age to kind of have some understanding of.
Well, here's one thing that I really start coaching parents on to shape like learning how to have that conversation with their kids at any age. If your kids can understand you speaking to them in full sentences, that's when you can start talking about money with them.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. My daughter actually started at 4.
Okay.
Right. And so that's fairly young, but if your child can understand you in full sentences, that is a perfect time to really start having that conversation.
I agree. I completely agree. So what do you think about allowances for kids?
I call it kids pay. I don't call it allowance.
Okay.
And my personal view on allowance is that it doesn't exist in my program that my coaching program for parents. And that is mainly due to the fact that, we're going to spend money on our kids anyway.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. And so what I share and I teach as a guide is that a certain percentage will go back to your kids that they're going to be responsible for. So you were just managing all of that cash flow before, but now you're going to give a certain portion back to them to manage.
Okay.
With you.
And so does that look, so you mentioned the word percentage. So that's not necessarily like a flat amount per month, right? Like that's not like you get $15 a month for nothing sort of thing.
Right. Well, and what's interesting is that I think that talking with many different parents about this is that allowance is sort of based upon, okay, like if you do your chores, if you brush your teeth, if you do all of this.
Yeah.
Well, here's, again, this is something very, it's personally based for me. And this is what makes sense for me, which is the fact that we don't get paid to brush our teeth or do our chores or clean our rooms.
Good point.
So it's not something that they should get money for, because it is just a part of our responsibility of having a home. Yes. And taking pride in and being grateful for what we have. We take care of our things. That's just something that we should do without being paid. So with that being said, I'll put some more context to it, is that in talking about how moving away from being seen as the source of money is learning how to respond to your child in a way where you're reminding them constantly now that you're not that source of money. So if they're asking you for something, it's always like, okay, you can have anything you want. You just have to plan for it. Okay. How much is in your blank account, right? So it's sort of like you're putting it back on them. And then it becomes like you're creating more opportunities for conversation and collaboration with your child, which I think it's so fun and it's so fulfilling once you get to that place where they're accepting the fact that they're part of the process.
Yeah, I love that. And I have to say that I do agree with you. I think I read a long time ago a book by Gail Vaz Oxlade, who said a very similar thing to you as, why are we teaching our kids that they get rewarded for being, doing basic human things? That's not necessarily the lesson that we want to teach them. We want to teach them money management, of course, like you say. And so that means that we have to give them some control over some portion of money, right? And I love that you don't even call it allowance, you call it a kid's pay. So yeah, that was kind of where I was going with that question. So I love that answer. Okay, so I think you've just answered this as well, but do you think kids should have bank accounts? And at what age would you open a bank account for a child?
Mm, I think when when a parent is reestablishing the thinking, like a different way of thinking around money,
Yeah.
I think it takes at least 2 or 3 or 4 years. I guess it depends on the child's age and how quickly they pick up, but at least for the first 2 years, everything should be physical,
Cash.
like cash,
Yeah.
right? Because the learning is still, even for me, I learn best by doing, right? It should be kept, when you're relearning a new habit, it should be as tactile as possible to integrate that as much as possible. And then hands down, once they've got the cash licked in managing it,
yeah,
physically, then that's when I would move over to the bank account.
Okay.
Because then it's an easier transition to bridge, right? Like,
yes,
once they have it unconsciously ingrained in them how they handled their cash, it'll be a much easier transition when they go into a banking.
Yeah, I agree. Like, obviously, there's something valuable in learning how an online banking app works, that kinds of thing. But when the cash is gone, the cash is gone. And there's no better way of visualizing that than literally an empty jar and an empty envelope, right? So yeah, I love that. Can you share any other tips about the do's and don'ts of money management as it relates to kids and young people? So pretty vague question, but I thought this would be a good opportunity for you to kind of give out any tips that we haven't already talked about.
Oh man. Some of the tips that I would just say is, I can't emphasize it enough, is just that stop thinking about abdicating the financial education that it should be at the schooling level. Yeah. I really invite all parents to really think about becoming the leader in the family. Yeah. To start coaching your kids on it. And even one of the hugest things is that if you feel like, I know I felt this way when I started this with my daughter. It's like, who am I to teach my daughter about this? Because I have failed in so many different ways. Like I'm in debt. I'm not in the perfect situation. I don't feel like I'm good with money. Like, I shouldn't be teaching my kid this. Mm. I wholeheartedly believe that you're still the best people to teach your kids, because you can teach from a place of mistake, because that's where we grow the most, for me anyway. And when I started teaching some of the principles that I teach in my Cash Smart for Life program, it really helped to ingrain in me and inspired in me a journey of, okay, if I'm teaching the basics to my kids, it just naturally inspired me to do, how do I integrate this into my adult world and in my own life, right? So it becomes a journey not just for you as the parent to take the lead in the family, but it becomes a journey, especially if you feel like you're not great with money, it'll naturally move you towards the direction of being really good to great with your money as well.
I completely, yeah. It's like you're helping your child with any sort of homework. Like, you're trying to do double-digit multiplication or something. You're going to have to learn something along the road of helping them do that as well, right? And yeah, we're our kids' biggest advocates, and we care the most about our own kids, and we should be the ones that are frontline with this kind of stuff.
Right. And to add to, to what else that I really advocate for in doing this is, I do believe that money, I want to help families really share more stories openly about how money can bring them together. There is so much, every single day, whether it's on the news or something, we hear stories about how money can tear families apart, and I truly believe that it's because there's been a lack of conversation around it, a lack of good thinking around it, and we have every opportunity to change that. You could use the Cash Smart for Life program and use money as a tool to bring your family together for life. So the Cash Smart for Life program is, really a lifelong program. So it really starts off with the basics of me coaching parents how to coach their kids about cash flow management. And in that is really all about the thinking and the mindset. And there is this whole system involved with that. Like I literally guide you through and provide you with a system of how to do that. So you don't have to think about, what's the system and how do I introduce this to my kids? It's all involved in the program that I teach. And really big picture thinking in doing that, what that does is that it really trains our kids to handle the purchasing of things, right? Like handling small purchases. And then because it's an emotional experience, right? It's never really, everything that we spend our money on isn't necessarily a logical experience. It's an emotional experience, right? So we're teaching our kids from a very young age. And so from small purchases to big purchases in life, right? That's where things can get really dicey and tricky. And why is it that most of the Canadians have we're spending more than what we have, is because we never really got a great handle about the emotions of handling bigger purchases, right? And so a part of my program also includes a specific strategy, which is called the kids wealth program, to sort of help identify how we can keep more money in the family, and how you as a parent can help coach your kids through the more from the small purchases to the the bigger purchases, whether it's like an awesome bike or a vacation or a Mac laptop or something like that, all the way to like a car, right? And then eventually into a business, right? So it's really coaching the parents too, like what are some specific financial tools that you can start setting up right now so that you can keep more money in the family and help them to continue handling the cash flow and create just using money to keep the money in the family and legacy.
Well, that sounds great. The program sounds obviously not just great in terms of the educational value, but you have some really concrete tools that can be used that will, actually create more wealth for the family, which who cannot like that.
Correct. And the reason why I choose to coach parents more than I do now, I started off with coaching kids actually. Mm-hmm. So fun. You know how kids, they say the darndest things. They do they are great. I found though it's not efficient because they'll take it in. They learn really quick, but if it's not being supported in the home by the parents, then it's really nothing, right? And I found this after coaching the kids for 4 or 5 years. It doesn't matter. They catch on, and they're trying to teach. They're trying to teach their parents, but they're not getting it, right? So it's much better to do it from the parent side and then go down. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so where can we find kind of more about this program in general?
Well, right now, and it's not a perfect process. I do a lot of what I'm sharing with you just one-on-one, person by person, but I do have a website called cashsmartforlife.com.
Perfect. And I'll put that in the show notes and the comments of this video for everybody watching. And Winnie's great to talk to, like she said, just one-on-one as well. So if this is something that you're interested in or you're struggling with, I highly recommend talking to Winnie about it. Anything that you can do to become a better parent or become better with money yourself is going to be a huge advantage to your kids. And I think that like you say, just putting money in a more positive light, person by person, you're doing a good thing. Do you have any other books or podcasts or courses that you would recommend on this subject aside from your program?
Another way to engage and have fun with your kids on the subject matter, although it, is I started with Cash Flow for Kids, created by Robert Kiyosaki. He also has a game called Cash Flow for Adults. The kids version is also great. And it's like a really great conversation starter. but it is a little bit, I would say, more advanced instead of like going through the basics of what I do.
Okay.
There are there's not really else. There's probably lots of other programs out there. I just can't think of anything actually on the spot at the moment, but I will share with you so that you can post on later on.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and like I know for myself, like I mentioned earlier, Gail Voss Oxlade, I can barely get her name out, but she's written a couple of books on the subject. She has a really good way of, like you do, explaining things in a real like layman's kind of terms so that anyone can really understand it. And she's definitely got the same sort of passion that she wants Canadians to embrace their financials and whether that be imperfect or not. So last question, I know you already talked about your Cash Smart for Life program, but where can we find you online in terms of socials and that kind of stuff?
Cashsmartforlife.com.
Okay. And then do you have a Facebook page?
I don't have a Facebook page specifically for this, no.
Okay. Okay. Well, maybe I'll just link your general one if anyone wants to contact you through that way.
Mm-hmm.
So I thank you again so much, Winnie, for doing this with me today. And I hope that all of my viewers got something valuable out of this and it gets your wheels turning when you're thinking about teaching your kids about money and whether or not you should give an allowance to your kids and that kind of thing. So that is it for this week. We will see you next week, and I hope you have a great day. Bye.